Good afternoon. Welcome. Tom Regan, I should say he, not we. I'm not going to be talking. Tom will be talking about mine rescue and emergency response at Homestake Gold Mine. Welcome, Tom. I always say we. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's a we thing. Thank you, Bethany. Again, welcome in our series of talks about the legacy and history of the Homestake mine and transition to science laboratory. This particular talk is going to focus on the mine rescue team and emergency response procedures over the really centuries. And we'll just get started here. This opening slide has some pretty good memories for me as I look at it, starting in the upper left-hand corner and the one below it. Those are a couple of patches that I have on some of my uniforms that I had when I was in mine rescue over the decades. And you can see that one of them says Homestake Mine Rescue, established in 1921. There were actually some mine rescue work done prior to that, and I have some pictures of that. But Homestake was really has a history of being innovative, and one of them was with emergency response and mine rescue. And of course, there's the Homestake Mine Rescue Smoke Eaters, and that was really focused more on those of us who were on the surface wildland fire team and the surface mine rescue team. That was a patch for that. And that was more in the later decades, 1970s, 80s, and 90s. In the upper right-hand corner is the Sanford Lab up in Lead that's going right now, and that's one of the patches that we have had on some of the uniforms. ERT stands for Emergency Response Team, Mine Rescue. And the scripture that says Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8 is the one printed down below. And it's kind of a mantra, not only for Homestake Mine Rescue, but for rescue teams throughout the country and the world. I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then said I, Here am I, send me." So being in mine rescue, emergency response, medical care, all kinds of vocations, military, nursing, caregivers of all kinds, it's a calling. And I think people need to understand that our vocations, and I think knowing most all of you, we understand that as our vocations are more than just a job. And the patch in the lower right is the patch that I wore on my sleeve when we were in different contests, particularly in the 1980s and 90s. Homestake Mining Company Mine Rescue Team member, Lead, South Dakota. And the center piece is one of the trophies that we received as part of the contests that we participated in. That happened to be a first place, a benchman trophy that I received. And a benchman is a technical mechanic that maintains and services and gets ready the breathing apparatuses and other equipment. So they are contests and training very specified for that. And before I get into this, a couple of thank yous. Again, I want to thank Aaron and Bethany for all the hard work they do with getting this all set up. And of course, Ralph Rosine for our backup videographer. Thank you, Ralph. And the gentleman in the very back looks a little bit like me. He's a good looking one. But that's my brother, Dan. Dan has been in mine rescue many decades as well. And he was also on the Lawrence County Search and Rescue Team. And we often talk about that sense of calling and what it means to serve communities by being there when things go bad. And of course, this little cartoon plugged into your head there, that's supposed to be me. Uh, there's a lot goes on when it comes to mine rescue and emergency response. A lot has to be crammed into this little computer we call our brain, and out comes clear, calm, concise decisions from all of that. And we talk about being effective and confident. Command takes precedence. Are you training for the chaos? And I came up with this the 7 P's of emergency response: prevention, preparation, practice, performance, progress, priority, and pause. Don't just do something, stand there. In other words, size up the situation before you go into a situation. The whole operation of rescue teams in the latter part of the 20th century and very active today is what's called the incident command system. And it was developed actually through the Department of Agriculture and wildland firefighters to bring in massive amounts of equipment and people to manage disasters, particularly forest fires. And it has carried over now into the entire industry of mine rescue, safety engineering, and emergency response. And it's a management tree. There's always one incident commander, only one. Now, there can be some shared responsibilities, and there's mainly 7 major offices: finance, logistics, operation planning, public information, and liaison. And then there's a safety officer that kind of watches over all of that. And that's what this graphic does. And there's a lot of training that goes into that as well. In our efforts, has us working with a lot of policies and procedures. And I'm not going to go through all of the details on all of this, but different types of uh, emergencies, different categories, localized, site-wide, which would be large-scale fire on the surface or underground, uh, significant hazardous material, those kinds of things, and then regional emergencies that would be not only local, state, county, but even national emergencies, including terrorism and pandemics. Now, again, lots of details in this presentation on purpose for documentation and for legacy, as this is part of a greater encyclopedia of information. But this is just a snippet of some of the training that has to be done. And there's 3 pages of this, and it's not all of it, that the current mine rescue and emergency response team members have to be trained in. And it takes about 3 years to get through all of this. But you can see there's an awful lot of it. And these are the check sheets that for each category or each type of skill that has to be done, anything from running locomotives to being able to go into the Oro Hondo electrical substation to going to different levels underground. And there's a series of number of times they have to do that. They have to show their skills and ability, and they have to be tested out. Lots of equipment involved in a rescue team. When Homestake closed, all of the emergency response equipment was sent to other mines by Barrick Homestake. And when we reopened, I was tasked with the job of purchasing all the equipment that we would need to have a formative mine rescue emergency response team. And I was allocated about $250,000 to get us started. And that included the minimum amount of equipment, including 12 self-contained breathing apparatuses at that time, $10,000 each. An example of one is sitting here on the table, although this is an older model than what you see here. Also, oxygen supplies, cap lamps, gas detectors. We have some foam generators that some large ones, and now I understand there's a couple of smaller ones that are battery operated that can go into smaller areas. High angle rescue equipment, very expensive equipment, and it all has to have maintenance, repairs, and lifespan. So it's an ongoing cost. It's like our insurance. We hope you never need it, but when you do, you have to have it. We also have what's called the lift bag system. They're airbags that can lift up to 80 to 112 tons on these lift heavy equipment or rocks. Also, our emergency response teams are made up of paramedics and emergency medical teams. We under the direction of a doctor, and that all takes a lot of training over and above the mine rescue skills and abilities and the on-site specific training that is needed. And this is some of the equipment that is used and trained in. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but we're getting it recorded, and we have this available for those who care to study that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to switch over to a different file. This is a very long and complicated presentation, which I did before, one of the last things I did before I retired. This is it. We're not going to go through the whole thing, although the whole thing is on here. And I did that just so it's integrated within the PowerPoint itself. But what this is a history of some of the major events over the 125 years on the surface and underground. And it includes a section about 14 locations that we have identified that are legacy potential spontaneous combustion fire areas underground today, and they're all above the 4850 level, which is the lowest operating level right now. And they're all really quite well contained and controlled, inspected, and the team has plans on how to attack them should they spontaneously combust, because there's lots of fuel, the timber, because they're all old timber stope areas or timberline areas, lots of heat because of the sand backfill that oxidizes and creates heat with the wood. And the third part of the fire triangle is oxygen. And it doesn't take much for an area to fall apart and allow oxygen to get into it. And there you go, you have a fire. And basically, the fires, if you will, may have flames, but for the most part, underground, they're more like charcoal fires. They just heat with lots of carbon monoxide, which is deadly. But I'm going to go through this very quick so we can get it on the video, but also give you a little bit of information as we go along. And I've tried to, throughout of all of these presentations, cite the sources so people can do further reading or do some fact checking. And by the way, all of this is going to be on YouTube through the West Hills Village site. Knowing the history and risks is an important part of the fire risk management. This oral presentation, because I did an oral presentation of this as well. So not only do we have the PowerPoint presentation, but I also have it recorded and it's been transcribed verbally, so teachers and future people can do the research with it. But it provides some of that legacy information to prepare, protect, and defend people, environment, property, and mission. Now, there's two parts to this. The first part deals with just a few of the major events, including the Ellison head frame and shaft fire in 1930 and the collapse of the shaft in 1975 and all of the changes, especially in ventilation and sand backfill piping that we had to do. 1942 Hearst Mercantile fire, the Deadwood burn of 1959, which was like the Johnny Cash song, Ring of Fire. There was literally a ring of fire all around Deadwood. And the Wayland building, which I'll show you some pictures of, very unique construction. The Homestake Recreation Building and Opera House fire in 1984, and the more recent Grizzly Gulch fire in 2002, which actually took place while we were in the middle of the cleanup closure. And myself and Dan, we were both part of that mitigation of the property protection plan, and I'll have some pictures of that. And then part two lists the 14 areas underground that have potential timber areas. So again, I'll go through these rather quickly. Here's a little bit of history of Lead, the library, the open opera house fire. This is the Ellison head frame showing a map of the shaft that goes from the surface to the 3200 and the collapse that took place in 1975. Here's the old Ellison complex as it was. A little bit later picture during the 1930s and 40s. This is one of the parts of the hoist that is now at the Homestake Adams Research Facility, and I think there's another one up at the Sanford Lab very similar to it. This tells the story of the July 10th, 1930 tragedy struck the Ellison shaft. A fire ignited from overheated pipes in the air compressor room shortly before 8 p.m. This was the air compressor that overheated. and it caused the oil-covered hoist steel rope to catch on fire, which was about a 8 or 10 inch wide flat hoist rope. And at that time, they did not have any safety dogs. And there was an individual on the conveyance that perished as the hoist cable burned through and the elevator-like conveyance, called a cage, dropped. This is a nighttime picture of the fire. This is what it looked like afterwards. A terrible tragedy for the mine and for the town and for the families. And of course, anytime that we have an incident, we do what's called a taproot or root cause analysis. And I have an example of one, excuse me. This is the beginning of a root cause analysis for the November 13th, 2025 power outage that took place. And it's still being considered up at the lab in Lead. It affected us here too as well, if you remember. But anytime there's an incident, we want to learn and prevent and have continuous improvement. And that's what all of this is about. That's what took place after that fire. The Ellison shaft itself collapsed in 1975. This is the history of that. And we had to go back in because the Ellison shaft carried all of the sand lines that took the slurry of sand and water back to the old mining areas to backfill to prevent collapse of mining areas around the workings. And they lost that sand line. So in a very short period of time, production came to almost a halt because they couldn't keep mining without backfilling the areas first. So over the course of about 4 or 5 months, they brought in drill machines called a borehole machine. And this is one very similar to one that I operated on, particularly on the 1100 and on the shaft stations near the Ross, to drill holes in the rock and use the rock as pipes. They were anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12.25 inch diameter holes to be able to take the slurry from the surface, transfer it by pipe over to the next hole, each level. And that's how they got the sand and slurry back underground using machines like this. And this is another one. This is actually a picture not related to the Ellison shaft, but it takes us back even further. This happens to be me in this picture when I was 21 years old. And I was a borehole operator and operated a machine like this that we drilled holes with underground. Now, I learned about mine rescue in 1975 when there was a fire on the 3050 level, I believe it was, maybe 3200. I'd have to go back. Anyway, I tried to get to work and I couldn't because the mine was basically shut down because there was a mine fire. And I was not happy. And I decided then and there, if I possibly could, I would join mine rescue. And from that day on, I've been involved in mine rescue and still am a consultant for the team from time to time, even today. But we used what was called the BG-174A apparatus. And this is one that I have right here that I'll do a little show and tell on in a little bit. And one of the things that took place on May 2nd, 1972 was a Sunshine Mine fire in Kellogg, Idaho. 173 miners headed to work underground, but 91 of them never came back. They were able to rescue 2 of them. And that book over there called The Deep Dark tells that story. And it was also a watershed time that led to the promulgation of the law for Mine Safety Health Administration And we still follow those rules today at the Sanford Underground Research Facility as a baseline for best practices. So lots of learnings, again, to improve. This gives you an idea of the location of where it's at up in Lead compared to the now present Yates shaft. Now these are, I'm going to go through these real quick, but these are the 14 sites that are underground that could be a potential. And like I say, the teams that are in place now have all of the mitigations in place and all of the plans. The potential is very, very low. But like I said, in emergency response, it's all about risk management, just like finances are all about risk management. And the potential is really low, but the consequences are very high. So you have to be able to manage that in a practical way and still keep the doors open. This is a training PowerPoint that I've inserted in here, showing different accesses. This is to the 300-foot level. It shows all of the different stoppings. And again, this is information that all of the teams have to know and practice all the time. And this will give you a virtual tour of the 300-foot level, very quick, going through a 14-foot diameter culvert into a 14-foot diameter drift that was built after the Ellison collapse for ventilation purposes. Lots of mapping. There's ventilation curtains now to help control. There's actually a aluminum door in that place after this photo was taken. This shows some of the old workings. You can see some of the old walls and timber from the shafts. Lots of details here on the different levels from the 1100 down to the 2900, showing the holes that we drilled between the levels to provide sand backfill. And those are also available and talked about, planned about if we were to ever have to get water down to those locations. Those pipes are still in place. They, of course, take some work, but we're always thinking about worst case scenarios and what ifs. Shows some of the piping systems that are in place. This is on the 1100-foot level now, showing how the pipes come from the surface down to the 1100 and then deeper from there. There's two main pipelines, the south and the north sand lines, different walls, different ways to manage the water and the sand. There's several old shafts that have to be worked around and known about. Stay back at least 10 feet. Old areas of the underground that can be considered a risk that have to be looked at. Different water that comes through the old workings that has to be managed and pumped out of the underground. This shows the location of the Ellison head frame in relationship to the open cut and the South Mill Street. Again, here's my little remembrance of in the 1970s, and then I went to the museum, and that same raise bore bit is on display at the mining museum. This is the Hearst Mercantile building that burned down. Hearst Mercantile was like the forerunner of all the big box stores that ever have been. They sold everything from groceries to millinery, furniture, you name it. Employees could go in and just sign a ticket and they'd take it out of their paycheck. It was a company town and a company store. And it caught on fire a terrible tragedy for the city. Then the 1959 fire, I was 9 years old, do the math. And uh, it was it was a pretty formative moment in my young life. I think it had a lot to do with my insistence on safety and being prepared. I remember they were rationing gas. We got just enough gas to make it to Rapid City. My brother, who was in high school, stayed in Deadwood to help provide services for the firefighters. My mother and dad made sure that he was with the right people, and uh, my brother and I got in the station wagon, loaded with what they ever could get in the station wagon, and away we went. And as we went out of town, I remember a sawmill along the side of the road on fire, right outside of Deadwood. Significant events inform our lives, and this is the history of it. Then there's the Wayland Building in 1969. The Wayland Building was constructed by a real estate dealer, Horace Clark, in 1930s. The three-story building housed apartments and 7 major businesses. And the house that was sitting there, the owner, Wayland, wanted to keep the house. So they just, as they built around it, they jacked the house up on cribs and kept raising it up. And the house sat on top of the three-story building. And I mean, it was just a feature in Lead. And as we grew up in Lead, we didn't think much of it. It was just a cool place, including the bowling alley and little hamburger stand in the basement. I think the bowling alley may have had 2 or 3 lanes. 3, yeah. Of course, they were hand pins. And that's the Wayland Building. You can just see the house at the top. I think this picture was in 1947 or something like that. But you can see the Wayland Building, and it had all kinds of stores in it. You can see the Red Owl grocery store along the main street. In my time, I think that was a Western Auto. I remember as a kid buying a red bicycle there. Recreation and Opera House fire in 1984. The Opera House was built in 1914 as a service for employees to go. It had a pool hall, a billiard hall, only for the adults, meeting rooms, a library, bowling alley, swimming pool, exercise rooms, meeting rooms, theater, Opera House, wonderful place of memories. And in 1984, probably started by spontaneous combustion. As they were cleaning underneath the stage, a rag was left in an oily cleaning rag was left in a can, and they think, they don't know for sure, but they're pretty sure that's how it started. And of course, it's been in here's a picture of the cool swimming pool and the bowling alley and the manual pin setting system. And again, some of the history and stories about it. And it's been getting refurbished. If you have an opportunity, go to Lead and spend a day or so there. Go to the Opera House, go to the Sanford Lab Visitor Center, maybe take the bus ride, go to the mining museum. And just for very reasonable, and there's some nice little restaurants there that you can enjoy. But the Opera House is coming along very nicely. Then the Grizzly Gulch fire in 2002, again, during the time that we were in the midst of cleanup closure of the mine. And again, I'm going through this quickly. Here's some pictures. The fire got very close to the mine office. That's right outside of the what we call the Education and Outreach building. That tree, of course, is gone now. And you can see the slurry bomber across the road from the water treatment plant. That young man right there is me. I was charged with calling the mine rescue team out and being the field supervisor for the team as we became a strike team under the direction of the lead fire department and the incident command of Department of Agriculture. And our task was to keep the grounds wet to prevent sparks from starting the building or property on fire. So we set up hoses all around. We had lots of training, including fire shelters. That's our mentor and teacher, Fred Roebuck, getting trained in the use of a fire shelter and other firefighting techniques and being certified in firefighting. This young man up here in the upper left-hand corner in the yellow shirt is none other than Dan Regan, along with Bernie Zastro up on top of the Ross Crusher room, putting sprinklers up there to keep the roof wet. And of course, the fire hoses. And then towards the end, we had strike teams out doing mop-up work on the property. And the biggest contributor and hazard for the lab at the time and the mine then was what we call ladder fuels. That's the grasses and bushes that come up against the trees that bring the fire up into the woodlands and can cause a major event. Black hat firefighters were staged at the visitor center area. I think there were about 50 of them, and I think for 2 nights there was just the whole area was covered with tents and kitchens for them. Yeah, it was an exciting time, pretty scary. Diane and I were actually in Rapid City at a granddaughter's soccer game, and the manager who had just arrived, a new manager for the final cleanup closure, got a hold of me and kind of in a panic said, "I don't know what to do." I mean, he didn't know much. I mean, he knew a lot, but he didn't know much yet. And so I got a hold of the Lawrence County Emergency Manager, Paul Thompson, who happened to be a former Homestake Mine Rescue team member. And he got a way and permission for me and Diana to come up to lead. And we were able to stay in town with the firefighters between shifts, making sure that everything was okay and we didn't have to evacuate. Because we were managing, or I was managing the field team. Fred was the overall safety specialist. A little scary. Yeah. You know, my granddaughter this weekend asked me, "Grandpa, were you ever afraid?" And I had to say, I don't think I was ever afraid. Adrenaline pumps in an emergency. Yeah. But you know, as Woody Hover said in that little video, training, 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 practice, practice, practice. And you rely on that. And it's all about the team, you know. You rely on each other. And pretty soon there's a sense of calm and assurance because you are trained. You can see how the fire came right up next to the building there. Now, these are the underground risk areas, real quick, just so I can get them on film or SSD card. This is a history of the various fires. Dan reminded me that we're missing one. I believe it was 1974. 73 or 4, we had a underground locomotive catch on fire, a battery locomotive, and they're near impossible to put out. As you've heard about the electric vehicles, you just don't put them out. I think many fire extinguishers were used and it didn't touch it. What finally put it out was we were able to drag the locomotive underneath a 4-inch water line and just inundate the battery box with water, and it finally cooled it and stopped the oxygen enough to where the fire was put out. But battery fires are extremely dangerous. And then there was a fire again in 2002 underground. Not a good year during cleanup closure. And this was on the between the 3050 and the 3500 and the 3650 level. Old workings, spontaneous combustion fire because ventilation was changed during the closure and oxygen got to it. It helped that we had a foam machine, but we couldn't get foam to it. So we had to build a wall and flood it with water instead. These are the 14 sites that we know about. And at the bottom, smaller, lower risk areas exist. And we check those at least once a year. So I created a map of the level where they are and took pictures of what they look like. So you can see these old workings that are there today. And the team goes and looks at them periodically. They have plans in place. A lot of them are being sealed off so oxygen cannot get to them. But that's a lot of timber, and that's what you can see. But above them, it could be 150 feet of square set timbers. This was the fire in 2002 that we had to take care of in order to continue the cleanup closure. And it only took us a couple of days to figure it out and to mitigate it because of all of the excellent training and preparation in advance. But it just shows the maps of the area near the Ross shaft. This was the old workings behind that wall that started on fire. And this was up on the top of it. We couldn't get to the fire because it had this, what we called a gob fence wall and backfill behind it. But we could detect the carbon monoxide through cracks in the wall. The heat and carbon monoxide worked its way through the cracks. And the only way to get water to the fire was build a little tiny cofferdam with a garden hose and fill that up and let it drain. It took a couple of days for that water to seep down and fill up the wall below. And we built this wall and put in gauges on it so we could tell where the water level was and how much pressure was on that wall so we didn't blow the wall out. And you can see at this time where the water level was. It was the water would seep through and the dampness of it. Of course, we had a relief valve if we had to relieve some of the water. That's Francis Iverson on the mine rescue team right there checking those gauges. And this is the team in preparation. Fred checking the oxygen sensors, the team getting ready to go underground. This is the team that did all the underground work. That's myself working actually on this very same machine as a benchman. Lots of old workings that have to be thought about and can't be ignored. And I often compare it to Disneyland or Disney World. When you go to these amusement parks in Disneyland in particular, the park and the amusement park is all up on top of a hill. And it's a false hill because underneath it is 2 stories of behind the scenes, all the infrastructure, all the plumbing, all the things that keep happy people going back to Disneyland. And it's kind of like that with the emergency response team. They're the folks behind the scene that make sure that these types of things don't interfere with the mission of science, education, and outreach at the lab. And that takes us back to where we were. Now, I will say about surface fires, our mine rescue team is only a support group for the actual firefighters for the surface. If there's a fire, incident command is the local fire department. We are not trained in direct firefighting. We don't have bunker gear and all of that. We're trained for underground fires and use indirect methods. We build walls, we backfill them, those kinds of things. We can attack a fire directly only in its incipient stage with a fire extinguisher. If you can't put it out with several fire extinguishers, you back off and you call the mine rescue team. And on the surface, you call the fire department, 911. And the mine rescue team then augments them. They don't do direct firefighting, just like we did during that Grizzly Gulch fire. We didn't do direct firefighting. We protected the property. We were able to do a little mop-up work. We had the certification for that. This is some of the pictures of training that I took. The one in the upper left-hand corner is on the 1,100-foot level back in an old area. You can see the boot-deep water and the team leader there. This is going through an old timberline on their hands and knees under oxygen, rope rescue work, first aid work, and so on and so forth. This is a self-rescuer. Everybody that goes underground has to carry one of these or something like it that will protect you from carbon monoxide. It does not provide oxygen. For oxygen, you need this big boy. This is a 3-minute or 2.5-minute slideshow of some of the training that has been done for the rope rescue team. And this is the training that was done with a foam generator. We also do confined space training, lots of tanks and confined space entry areas. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Mine Safety Health Administration metal and non-metal mine rescue contests practice responding to simulated emergency. This photograph shows an early version of the self-contained breathing apparatus called a McKay. It was a 2-hour demand apparatus. The next version was a 4-hour demand apparatus that had a constant dosage of oxygen so that your breathing bag continuously filled with oxygen. The next generation, which Sanford Lab is using, is a positive pressure. So that system has springs that push on the bag that has the oxygen. So you don't have to worry about when you take a breath with a demand apparatus, you create a momentary uh, situation where it's negative pressure and you could draw in some carbon monoxide. And when you're talking 6, 8, 10,000 parts per million of carbon monoxide, it only takes a few atoms of carbon monoxide to inhibit your blood from connecting with oxygen. The positive pressure apparatus ensures that if there's a pinhole leak in the hoses or the face piece, it's always pushing outward. And now they're coming up with another generation. By the way, the New York Fire Department uses the same apparatus that the Sanford Lab uses underground today. I have a history here of mine rescue with some photographs. This shows us 1927 McKay SCBAs. This was the contest team that I was on, I believe 1985. We won the national champion in Las Vegas, Nevada. There were 32 teams in the United States and a couple of teams from Mexico. And we took first place team and first and second place benching and overall first place at that point. I guess that was our 15 minutes of fame. So that concludes the PowerPoint, but I did want to show you this apparatus for just a second, and then we can do some question and answer if you'd like. sorry. He asked, what is the foam that is used with these foam generators? And behind that question is an agenda. Because right now, if you're aware, there's a big push to do away with firefighting foam because it can be cancer causing. A lot of firefighters that have used foam, Ellsworth Air Force Base and other, they have now come up with a foam that is non-hazardous to human interaction. And that's the type of foam we got. I think it's called PFD or PDF foam that is the hazardous stuff. But we don't use that. It's a water base. Basically, all it does is it's kind of like the same foam that you use at the wedding or the kids use. It's non-hazardous, just makes a bubble. And really, it's only meant to carry moisture to the fire. It just...
What is this chemical cover?
I would have to get the material safety data sheet, and I can get that for you. I have it if you really want to know. Yeah, I don't know the exact chemistry of it, but I have. Yeah, it's important. That's one of the things we all have to learn is what the safety data sheet is for every single material that we come in contact with. All employees, mine rescue employees included, any chemicals or substance that they have to deal with, they have to be trained and read this material safety data sheet to know what it is and what to do if it's spilled or what the hazards are to the different body parts and how to handle it. So, and that goes on every day up at the lab. It goes on here. The janitors here have to be aware of what chemicals they're using in our apartments. Yes.
I don't know if you have the numbers before you, but how frequently were fatalities when the mine was in operation?
That is an excellent question. Over here on the table, I have 3 books that Don Toms from Lead wrote, and it describes every fatality that was associated with the Homestake mine from 1876 until the last fatality at Homestake was 1991. And the total number, and I actually have a picture, it's going to be in the next presentation as a memorial of the miners that died at the Homestake mine specifically, not counting all the other mines in the surrounding Gold Belt area, but right around 850 total at Homestake. Now, that is all, when you look at it, you have to do your statistics on it. And in the early centuries, the 1800s, the early 1900s, the bell curve was really high. And as time went on, the number of fatalities, the number of injuries have gone down, down, down. Again, until 1991, until closure in 2003 or 4, final closure, there was zero fatalities. And it all has to do with risk management. It all has to do with the injury triangle, if you will. So you got one fatality. If there's one fatality, there's probably 100 that are life-changing events. If there's 100 life-changing events, there's probably 1,000 injuries that have hospitalization. If there's 1,000 hospital injuries, then there's probably 10,000 first aid. If there's 10,000 first aid, there's probably 50,000 near misses. So what does Sanford Lab track? They track near misses. If you can get it, if you can track near misses and say, oh, wait a minute, I just about got hit with that thing hanging in my way. How do I prevent that? And they're really keen on that. You attack it at its lowest possible point of damage or hurt. And that doesn't apply just to physical injuries, but also to the environment and to scientific experiments. There's a lot of work that goes into, as I said, what ifs. What are the hazards? What could happen? How do you prevent them? And how likely are they to occur? And then you get into the whole system of risk management. The best way to get not have an injury is not do the work. Okay. And there are some cases where you say, no, we're not going to do that. But what's the alternative? Maybe we find a substitute. And the next step is maybe there's an engineering control, maybe a railing or some kind of physical barrier, a rotating piece or a rotating wheel. Well, you got to have the rotating wheel, but how do you prevent somebody from falling into it? Well, you put up a guard, you know, and or maybe instead of a wheel, you come up with some other device. You know, LED lights is a good example. They don't put out much heat like an incandescent. So you substitute incandescent for LED. Those kind of simple changes increase the likelihood of having a good outcome. And then if that doesn't work, then maybe you need some controls that control how you do things. Hearing protection, for instance. There are noise situations, drilling hammers, those kind of things that even with double hearing protection, if you're in it too long, you'll lose your hearing. So they can figure out, well, we'll just limit the amount of time. We'll wear double hearing protection, but instead of doing it for 4 or 8 hours, we'll only allow it for 1 or 2 hours to let you heal back up. Those are administrative type controls. Same with length of work. There are studies on how long it's good to use administrative controls to get people from working too long, too hard, and not being able to do their job safely. And finally, the last preventive measure is personal protective equipment. You put up some kind of barrier, you know, and that's, if you're using this, you failed in all of the other ways. That's a last resort. That's the last insurance policy you have is personal protective equipment. Hard hats, gloves, knee pads, clothing of any kind. That's our lowest level of protection. All right. Thank you all for your attention.